Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for a brand new Film Fanatic show. It is August 6th, 11:22. Beautiful day. It looks like it's going to be pretty hot today on Thursday morning. Hope everyone's doing good. So yeah, I just came back from a little road trip. Had a show with Quantum at this really awesome venue in Reading, Pennsylvania. So I don't know, it was a fun experience and kind of a first for me in some ways. So I figured I'd make a little video for it for what it's worth. What the fuck? Why not? So I played Tuesday night. I had a show called Pleasure Tone in Reading, Pennsylvania. Super cool venue. So um, before I get, I guess, into the little mini adventure that it was, and it was really fun. And I got back last night about. I took my time. It was good at least because I had a couple of days travel time, so I didn't have to like rush around or kill myself getting somewhere or go to a gig or go somewhere like totally exhausted. Like it worked out pretty good as far as the timing and all that stuff goes. So and it was the first time I guess I've done something like this, and it was a really fun experience, and it wasn't really planned. It wasn't very planned out, and there was some funny things that happened. So I figured I'd just make a video about it for what it's worth. So with Quantum, I mean, last year we celebrated as a band about 10 years, 11 years as a band, which is crazy. I still scratch my head at that because when I think of the bands that I knew and the music scene that I knew back 10 or 11 years ago, all the bands that were around, almost all of those bands are gone. And of course, as bands break up every day, it's like marriages or relationships. Things break up, change, new things come out of the ashes. Like that's a constant thing. But when I think of like that the band has been around for as long, for over 10 years or for 10 years, and that we're still like I'm still doing it, and I think of when I started the band, projects that I was in or bands that I knew at the time, they have just folded. And it's I think it's kind of a miracle when you can find a person or two and you have that connection with, and it can be long lasting, and you can, you have all your peaks and you have your your peaks and valleys, your extreme ups and extreme downs, and you're able to like if there's still that chemistry and passion, then you'll keep doing it. But it's very hard sometimes, like relationships. So it kind of gives me a sense of humility, and I'm proud that I've been able to keep this thing going for as long as I've been doing it. With a lot of ups and a lot of I wouldn't say there's been a lot of downs, but again, there's always things that get in your way, big hurdles, and then you have like little crises that you try to revert, try to you weather the storm. But I wouldn't say we've ever had a bad period, because if it was that way with this band, it would have probably ended a long time ago. But ba- basically, when I started the group, after a year or two into the band, it was with me and my great friend Mike Whitehead, who played bass. And after I don't know, we first started the band, probably a year after where we started playing gigs as a band, as a duo, I had these ideas of like, maybe why not? Let's throw some caution in the wind and maybe do some tours, or maybe go out of state, and those kinds of things. So there was a pretty cool period after about a year and a half or so. We were, playing local gigs, but then I was starting to like trying to book gigs out of state, and there was a pretty cool little period where we were doing these little kind of mini tours, basically like 5 days or so, 5 or 6 days, 3 or 4 days, kind of at a time, where you would go out of town, and I mean try to book a little mini tour. And so for a while we were doing that, and it was really fun. We got we got a chance for a little while to play quite a few gigs in New York City, and we played in Vermont a few times, Massachusetts, down in Boston as well. We had a lot of really fun shows in Montreal, which was probably the best. That was probably my favorite city that we've ever played at in the in the past. So basically, a lot of we played pretty good amount of gigs in New York and Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont. I think we played in Boston once or twice, and then Canada and Vermont and what have you. So it was cool, and for a while we were doing that. And sometimes some of the shows, the way they were lining up, it was during the winter season. And then I we kind of stopped doing, for whatever reason. We started going back mainly to playing local gigs, and it's been quite a few years, probably 7 years maybe or so, since I was able to take Quantum kind of out on the road and to go out of state. This year's been probably, I don't know, it's probably been the best year for the band, I think. But also, there's been some of the biggest changes with the band because a few months ago, Mike Whitehead, who has been in the band since the beginning, decided to kind of move on, and then I decided to, I thought about maybe getting an additional player because I was so used to playing with Mike because of what he brought to the band. And so I thought for a while of maybe I'll bring in someone else. Maybe, continue that kind of duo thing. And I actually had a really good friend which was really nice and kind of a flattering proposition, but I had a really good friend who offered to play in the band. He wanted to be a part of the band, and I was like, that really cool because he's always been one of a really supportive person. We're really great friends. But I don't know. I thought about it for a while, and then I decided to kind of just continue on solo. So that's what I've been doing since Mike left. And I thought, like, and I feel like it's starting to kind of come into its own thing because I've had to adjust, a lot of different variables since it's just me. So this year has been, I don't know, it's probably been the busiest year I've had with this band, and it's been just fantastic. Just trying to. I'm a big fan of shows and playing gigs and recording music, but I really feel like bands really develop the more gigs that they play. I've always, and I've talked about this before. I just feel like it's this thing of like, it's the ultimate testing ground for material and how you can adjust to things that are out of your control. And then if you're getting reaction from people or you're not, that for me especially when I have new material that I'm playing live, that will really help and shape kind of my feeling as maybe I should rework that particular song. Maybe it's going to be a really good song and I should keep adding it to the set, or sometimes just throw it out. And so I feel like that's the ultimate testing ground, seeing how it reacts and the energy it gets or that it doesn't get, the sets and the music. And I feel like it's like, I don't know, it's fun and it's a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work, but I also feel like it's kind of like going to the gym where you're like working a muscle and or muscles, and you just you have ups and downs, you have good gigs, bad gigs, whatever, but you're still like developing your repertoire, your muscles and your your the sound is moving forward hopefully. So again, I've been doing, and lately, a lot of the shows, well, really all of the Quantum shows as of late this year, 2026, have all been local. So I was like, you know what? I was thinking it would be really fun to try doing some more out of state shows. I had ideas, and I do have ideas of doing some touring with the band because it's been so long. I actually, funny thing is like I said at the beginning of the show, Quantum had pretty good amount of experience playing doing these little mini tours and such. And about it was right before COVID, probably about 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago now. I had plans to. I was starting to put together a pretty big tour for the band for Quantum, and so I worked pretty hard. I got some contacts. It was going to be during the summer, and I booked shows in down south, and I think I booked some shows in like Boston and maybe one or two other places in New England. But I also booked some shows down in the southern area of the country. I even had some dates in Texas, and I think I had some dates in Louisiana, and it was in July, and and again, it would have been a lot of driving and a lot of traveling, but I was excited, and I actually got maybe, I don't know, maybe it was like 5 or 6 shows throughout the country, and they were pretty far. The farthest date or dates were in Texas, and I was really excited about it because I spent a lot of time trying to get it, and then I presented the whole thing to Mike, who was in the band at the time, and his reaction was, "You're crazy." He's like, There's no way I'm going to go and play a gig in Texas in July," and he totally kind of canceled canceled himself out of that situation, and I was like, okay. So I was kind of bummed, but then I ended up, at that time, there was a time also with the band with Quantum, I would only like book a gig if it was the two of us. And so if I was trying to book a gig and Mike couldn't do it, I would usually pass on that date or try to reschedule it for a date that he could do. Fast forward a few years later, we started getting into this place of where if Mike couldn't do the show, I would try to do it anyway. And I kind of got in that space, the last 2 or 3 years. But at that time, when I booked this tour, that wasn't the case. So because he backed out of it and didn't want to do it, I canceled the tour, and I was pretty bummed because I was like, oh man, I worked pretty hard getting this together. Some of the venues looked pretty cool, and I knew it was going to be super hot and a lot of traveling, but I thought it would have been fun to like push ourselves and play in some new markets. So anyway, I ended up canceling that tour, and that never happened. And then the beginning of this summer, I thought, okay, let me try doing this again a little bit. Try to get my feet wet, by playing out of state again. So I, got some dates. The two shows that I got which was this past Tuesday, playing in Reading, Pennsylvania at Pleasure Tone, and then I got another show which is coming up this Saturday at Auspicious Brew, which is in Dover, New Hampshire, and I booked that show, and that's coming up this Saturday. So I was like, cool, all right, great, awesome. And this show was the first time I have played out of state with Quantum in a very, very long time. So sometimes on my it's one of my problems, I guess. I'm not the best planner. Like I will like say yes or no to something, but I'm usually someone who will say yes to something if it's a situation that's around a gig or a traveling thing. I will, if it sounds really cool and I'm excited by it, I will just say yes. But then as far as planning it, like the logistics around it, I'm kind of bad at that. So I booked this gig for Tuesday, and I didn't really think about the plan, like the logistics, the places we were going to stay, who I could go with. I just kind of booked the gig, and I was like, okay, we're going to do it. And then that was it. And I sat on it for a while. And then I was like, you know what? I gotta make a little bit of a plan because, it's about a 13, 14 hour drive, and that's going to take some time, and gas is, well, everything's fucking expensive, but gas is crazy, and I want to figure out logistics of where I'm going to stay, and who could I get to ask. I wanted to go down with a friend at least. So I put my a few weeks ago, I asked a couple of friends, and I had one buddy who I'd asked about going down, and he was definitely interested. But then he never got back to me. I never talked with him again. Kind of fell off the radar. And then I talked to another friend, and he was totally gung ho for doing it. So I was super excited. And this friend in particular is a guy who loves to travel. He goes on these wild adventures. So I was like, this guy will be perfect, and he's a great friend of mine. And so he was all set to go. He was going to go down with me, and we were going to kind of probably split the driving. So, and I told him I had a place to stay in Reading, Pennsylvania, but the people that were there were going to be out of town, so I'm not really sure as far as where we're going to stay, but we'll work something out. That was the plan at that point as far as what we were going to do, as far as traveling and staying. And so he was just like, "Yeah, we'll figure it out, and we'll leave Monday. The show is on Tuesday, and then come back Wednesday." The one thing I thought was really cool, at least going into it, being that logistically wasn't playing out so well. Because usually, like when I've done tours, and it's been really fun. Is the last 2 years I've done a lot more touring, especially with Osmia and Bookhead Sweet Tooth, and some of those tours were pretty big tours. I mean, the furthest that I've gone for tour is down south to like West Virginia, and then also Washington D.C. But all of those tours and the tours, it was probably about 4 times or so that I've done some tours the last year and a half, 2 years. Those tours, as far as the logistics, as far as like places we were going to stay and all that kind of thing, and timing and setting up enough time, travel time so you can get to the venue. All that stuff was really, really worked out with those guys. We knew exactly where we were going to stay. We all had places to stay as the band, and then you know the itinerary was there. I didn't do that really at all for this, which was a little bit stupid, but it was okay. I was willing to wing it a little bit. So I we were all set to go, and then 3 days, 2 days before the trip, Mike bailed on coming down. He couldn't do it. My other friend Mike, could not do the show. Something happened at work. He couldn't get the person to cover. So I was like, okay, well that's a bummer. So I'm gonna do all the driving myself, and I will have to like figure out where I'm gonna stay and blah blah blah. And it's funny. So after that happened, I was like thinking about a place that I was gonna go. So originally I was gonna go to from Maine to Newburgh, New York, which is kind of upstate. I grew up in Rockland County, New York, which is about 40 minutes from New York City, more in the country area, somewhat. And but the plan was, did a lot of planning as far as looking up how to get there, routes. The main thing I wanted to do was to try to avoid having to drive through New York City because it's kind of a clusterfuck. That happened to us a couple times with Osmia, or one time with Osmia, where we ended up taking a little bit of a wrong turn going to Pennsylvania. We actually played at Pleasure Tone twice, and that's how I had this connection. But one time we went down there, the first time we ended up taking some kind of weird route, and it took us directly into New York City. And it was kind of a clusterfuck getting out of there, and it put us back on time. So I wanted to try to. And Pennsylvania is, again, very close to New York City, so I wanted to try to avoid having to go through New York City if I could. So I found a place, Newburgh in New York, that I was going to go from Maine. And I was all set to go. I had a route kind of planned. And I did a little bit more research, and I looked up Newburgh, and I didn't know much about Newburgh. And it looked kind of a pretty dangerous town or city. And I was like, there was like I looked up reviews for the city and a bunch of information about the cities. Like, basically, if you go to the historic or the downtown area, It's really beautiful. There's a lot of cool like little restaurants and bars, but then a lot of people were saying don't go outside after 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, and don't go to any of the back, kind of town areas because it's very dangerous. I guess it has a high homicide rate. It's very dangerous. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm not going to go there because it is similar to, I guess, to Poughkeepsie. Poughkeepsie, New York is that way. It's it's not the greatest place. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to go there because I was bringing my equipment. I don't want to get robbed. And so I was like, okay, maybe what I'll do is I'll go drive directly to my hometown of Rockland County and then go from there. So that's what I ended up doing. I just basically, it was pretty much a straight shot. I just ended up going right to basically my hometown where I grew up. Which I don't really, I kind of hate my hometown. I think it's kind of a shithole. But it was cool to visit and to kind of reconnect with some friends that I had down there. So, and on Sunday night, the day before I left, I one thing I needed to do was figure out how to keep I had to get a phone charger because my cigarette lighters and my phone in my car don't really work. And this was the first time I was really taking this truck for a long trip. And usually, if I go on trips, you know, we usually it's with the band, and then we share driving, and then they have a charger and different phones and all those things. But this was kind of the first time I was going to be doing this by myself, and that was it. So I had to figure out what can I do as far as getting a proper charger. So Sunday night I had a gig. I should say Sunday during the day in Rockport I had a gig. So then after the gig, I was like, okay, I want to try to take care of everything tonight. Get my car packed, get clothes together, get everything sorted out so I can just leave early Monday. And the thing that I liked was that I had Monday to travel. Tuesday night was the gig, and then yesterday, I had the whole day and night to travel, so I wasn't like having to, kill myself either way. So after the gig, I went to Walgreen to try to get a phone charger, and I told the girl in there that my cigarette lighter doesn't work, so I have never really gotten a big charger for a car before in my for my phone. I've never really used that before. So she said, "Well, you can try this adapter. This should work." Sold me this adapter. I took it out to the car, plugged it in. Nothing. I was like, "Okay, this isn't working." So I literally went back into the store and got my money back. So I was like, "Okay, that's not going to work. So what can I do?" So then I decided to go to Staples in Rockland, Maine, because it's kind of, I mean, it was out of my way, sort of, but I decided to go to Staples on my way to for this trip and to try to figure out the plug-in situation for my phone. So got up pretty early Monday morning, drove to Staples. It was torrential downpour here in Maine, just torrential downpour the whole time. Pretty much most of the trip down to New York. But I went into Staples, and it was really funny because I figured out going in there, it'd be super easy to figure this charger scenario for my phone out quickly. Usually, when you go in there, there's like 10,000 people that are in there working, and so it's always easy to figure it out. If you have questions and all those things. But I went in there in the morning, and there's literally just one girl in there, and I was like, "What the heck?" And there was this one girl, and she was in the copy section where they make copies, and she was the only person. She was running the whole store, and she looked. I felt like she was probably in high school, and I felt bad because I'm like, man. And it was like 9 in the morning. It was pretty early, but she's like literally running the whole place. So I'm standing around. She's waiting on customers. I didn't know what I was really looking for because this was new. And so I got to talk with her, and I asked her what I should use and what I need and blah blah blah. And so I talked with her, and she recommended this particular kind of charger for me, and so I ended up getting something that I thought was going to work, and it was this other plug-in. So I was like, okay, I think I'm good to go. And then I headed down to New York. I got down to Worcester, Mass, which is sort of a little less than halfway. And my phone started totally dying, and I'm like, what the heck? I got 4 hours into my trip, my phone started dying, and I'm like, this thing that I got from Staples is not working. So it was some other plugin, and I'm an idiot sometimes when it comes to technology. So then I was like, okay, my phone is dying. I got to figure this out because I had a long way to still go. I had another, 5 hours, 4 hours. So I stopped at Walmart, the evil Walmart, went to their electronics department, talked to this guy. I brought in all the little cables that I have, my plugins. Talked to the guy. I was like, hey, so this is the scenario I'm trying to, I'm kind of in a little bit of a predicament here. I'm traveling quite a ways. My phone is not staying charged. What should I do? So he recommended me to get this little battery that I got, which I got for like 15 or 20 bucks. And I was like, okay, cool. So you keep this battery will apparently charge your phone if you have it. And so I got this little mini battery, and I showed them all the cords, the plugins. I told them what my car, that it's an older truck, and the cigarette lighters don't work very well. So, and I said, do I need to buy any other additional pieces of equipment? He's like, nope, you're good. He's like, this thing will, before you even have to charge this battery, it will probably be good for like 4 to 5 days. So I was like, awesome, great. So like, got the battery, got it all hooked up, and then I was good to go. So I was all set. I thought with that, with my phone. So then I drove to New York. No problem. I did hit a lot of traffic going down, which put me behind about 2 hours. An hour and a half. It was a little bit of a pain, but it was fine otherwise. And I made it to Rockland County. And I haven't been back to Rockland County in like 15, 20 years, which was the neighborhood, my hometown that I grew up in. It was a trip to go back there. And I had reached out to a friend that I went to high school with that I haven't seen in years, that I was going to come down, but she had never gotten back to me. So I was like, okay. And so I reached out again when I got down to Rockland County, and I was driving around for a little while. The towns that are there are Haverstraw, Spring Valley, Nanuet, Garnerville, which was my hometown. I went to high school there. I grew up. I grew up there as a kid, and it's about 45 minutes from New York City, so pretty close to the city, but it's in the suburbs more or less. But it's pretty built up. It's kind of a shithole, honestly. I kind of hate Rockland County. So I got to Rockland County. I drove around for a little bit, and I was starving, so I found a restaurant, got some food, and had a beer, and the food was actually really great. And I reached out again to my friend Heather. Hey, I'm in town, and then I was like, why don't I just call her? So I just was sitting at the table, decided to call her, and at this point, I still had no place to stay. It's weird. I have relatives, a lot of relatives in New York, but I love them. I get along with them, but I just have this weird relationship with them. Like, um, it's just weird. Like, they wouldn't like, I don't know. Like, I couldn't get a place to stay with them because my mom was like, well, you're gonna be like, I was talking to my mom about I could stay at my uncle's house down there. I got other, a bunch of family that live there. I could stay, maybe crash at their house. And she's like, no, 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 don't do that. It's going to be an inconvenience. It was like this whole big thing. And I'm like, why is that this big inconvenience? Are we family? Just weird. So I never, like, did that. And it's just very weird. Um, my family's great, and I love them to death, but it's just weird shit like that. I don't get. It's just really weird. So anyway, I still at this point didn't have a place to stay. And so I was sitting there having dinner, and I just called my friend Heather, and she picked up the phone, and she apparently did not see my messages that I was in New York. And I was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" She's like, "How are you?" "Good." And I was like, "I'm I'm in Stony Point, which is the town she lived in." And she was like, "No way, no shit, no way." So I we made plans for as soon as I was done eating to go over to her house and to hang out. So I got done eating, went over to her house, and it was a trip going to her place. You know, it was a beautiful house. She lives in this beautiful house. She lives in the same house that she grew up in. It's in this really nice, beautiful spot connected to this park, Lowland Park, which is a really beautiful spot. And they live in this really secluded area. Her father used to be a college professor, and her family's got quite a bit of money, and so he passed away a few years ago, but she still lives in this house. So they have this, really nice house and beautiful area. And so I went there and saw her, and it was wild, and it was really cool. Hadn't seen her in years. Met her kids. Her kids were all grown up, and we hung out and watched anime. And it was great. It was really nice. Reconnected with her and her family, her mom, and then her sister as well. And it was a trip. And then, kind of at the end of the visit, I was starting to go get my stuff and get ready to go. And she's like, "Do you have a place to stay?" And I was like, "Well, I'm working on it." She's like, "Why don't you stay here?" So I was like, "Okay, if that's not an inconvenience, I will take you up on it." So then I was like, "Okay, awesome." And so I grabbed my bags out of my car and I stayed there that night. And I got up for whatever reason. Um, I slept, but I couldn't really sleep. I got up so early on Tuesday, which I hated. I got up like at 5:30. I don't know. I couldn't go back to sleep, and so my brain was racing. I couldn't go back to sleep, so I just was like, fuck it, I'll stay up." So I ended up just staying up, and it was super early, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then friend Heather had to go to work at 8:30. And so I, packed up my stuff, took a shower, and then I headed out after that at about 8:30 and drove to Pennsylvania border, which is about like an hour away from Stony Point. So I drove from there, from Stony Point to Pennsylvania, stopped for a little bit, took a little bit of a break, and Reading, where I needed to go for the gig, was from that point about 2.5 hours. Yeah, 2.5 hours from there. So it was from Stony Point to Reading was about 3 hours, which I did tried to look up the route and tried to do some routing research, and that's what I found a lot. So I was like, okay, cool. But I took the one thing that was really awesome from Reading to get to Pennsylvania. I took this really beautiful route through Pennsylvania, and it was just gorgeous, like beautiful mountains and trees and parks. It was a really beautiful drive into Pennsylvania. And so, and my phone situation was taken care of. My phone was still being charged, and no worries as far as that goes. So then I proceeded to go to Reading, and I got down to Reading, around 2:30, 3 o'clock, pretty early. The gig wasn't until about 7:30. So, but I wanted to get down there early and hang out. And Reading, Pennsylvania is like a super. It's kind of a big city. It's like the first time I went there, I was kind of like, whoa, like this is like a really, like it's like a concrete jungle. It's a pretty thick and dense kind of city. A lot of traffic, a lot of cars, a lot of hustle and bustle. There's so it's actually a pretty big city. So I got to Reading, and somehow, luckily, I found parking. Parking the two times that we played at at Pleasure Tone, which is the venue I played at. I played there twice before with Osmia. One of the things I remember was that parking was a total pain in the ass there because it's so congested there. So I was a little bit like, okay, I'm gonna have to drive around, find parking, and then, but I gotta load my gear in and figure that out. But somehow I lucked out and I found parking within 2 minutes when I got down to Reading, and it was really close to the venue, so I was able to like park and actually just walk my gear over. So it was actually pretty easy. I didn't have to pay any money for parking. So I was like, sweet, okay, awesome. So then I just kind of basically hung out in town for a few hours, and it was in this Spanish Latin American neighborhood, and it was a trip. One of the things like that I really appreciate, and I should say one of the things I realized that is such a difference with here living in Maine. Like where I grew up in New York, like I was always used to all kinds of ethnicities being around, and having African American friends, having friends from Latin America, a lot of Spanish and Hispanic, friends, and big communities of African Americans, and a big Latin community, and even an Asian community. Just having a multicultural environment like what New York is. In Maine, not so much. It's pretty white. So it was a trip, like hanging out in this neighborhood and realizing I'm the only white person in this entire neighborhood. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like that's one thing I miss about New York. So and I went to this little Mexican place that had really awesome tacos, and kind of hung out in town for a while, and just kind of hung out in the neighborhood, and it was cool. And then it got time to loaded my gear. The venue has these long staircases, which is a little bit of a pain. And I loaded. Luckily, I don't have a lot of gear with quantum stuff, especially if I don't have sound. It's actually not very much. And so, but enough to where I was like sweating my balls off when I got to the top because it was pretty hot too down there. But I got situated, got my gear loaded in, and then started getting stuff set up, and the actual show and everything went really really well. Uh, it's such a cool venue. It's such a deceiving venue because the area of Reading that this is in is kind of ghetto-y, and it's very there's like there's broken bottles and trash everywhere, and it's a little bit sketchy. But I felt totally safe there, and I think it's a totally safe area. People are really nice, but it's a little bit of a sketchy area, especially at night. And there's kind of garbage everywhere, and it looks outside the venue. You're like, this place is going to be probably a shithole. But then when you walk up the stairs and get into the venue, it's like it's beautiful. It's a really nice venue. Nice big stage, beautiful lights, just a really cool setup. So the show itself went really well. I thought it was super fun. Met a lot of cool people. The other bands that played, they were also all solo electronic. Very cool. It was great. It was a Tuesday night, so there wasn't as many people there. Like if it was a Friday or Saturday night, which is their big nights. But there was still, a good amount of people there, and made it totally worthwhile. And so it was super fun. And then got done playing, and then I started packing up. And my plan was to maybe go back to New York, find a place to stay, and then get up the next day and come back to Maine. That was kind of my plan, more or less. I didn't want to have to drive from Pennsylvania all the way to Maine in one day because that's a pretty long day, and I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But I thought about driving as much as I could, and then take a break, find a hotel or whatever, and then go. And I had a loose plan to stay somewhere with someone there in Reading, but they were going to be out of town. But then later on after the gig, that same person said, "We're actually here, and if you want to stay, you can." So, which was really really nice. And I almost took them up on it, but then I was like, I don't know if I want to wake up and have to drive, you know, 13, 14 hours in one day, plus traffic. So I was like, I really appreciate it, but then I was like, I think I want to go drive as much as I can, at least 4 or 5 hours, stop, and then come back to Maine. So that's what I did. I ended up driving out of the city and got back to New York, got back to kind of the Rockland County area, almost to where I was before, pretty much, the night before. So it took me from New York, and I basically followed, or from Pennsylvania, I basically followed the same exact route that I took to go down. Came home to New York, or I shouldn't say came home, but I got back to New York, and at that point I was like, it was pretty late. It was about 2 in the morning, 1:30, 2 in the morning, and I was like, I should probably get find a hotel or something. And I was like looking pretty desperately for a 24-hour diner, but 24-hour diners do not exist anymore. It's a trip. I couldn't find any diners, like literally nowhere. The only two diners that I found are one closed at midnight. It's just super weird. So it was kind of lame. So, and then so I got to Rockland County and I went to stop and get gas and what have you. And I took a break and I noticed my phone started decharging big time. And I was like, what the hell? And I had virtually no power on my phone. And I'm like, what the heck? Why isn't this thing charged? And so I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do? And then so I ended up doing what I ended up doing, which was so stupid. I ended up going into the gas station and I ended up asking the guy in there, is it okay if I like come in? I'm having some problems with my phone, my charger. It's not working right now. The battery was dead, and a little bit in a conundrum. Can I just hang out here and charge my phone so I can figure out what I'm going to do? And so that's what I did. I ended up hanging out in this gas station, and it was like 2:30 in the morning, charging my phone. I hung out in this gas station for like an hour while my phone charged, and I was, a little bit frustrated at that point. So then, after my phone was relatively charged, I decided to go and just try to find a hotel. And I found this one place that looked pretty cheap. Looked it up online, and I went to it. And this place was a dump. Like, this place was so sketchy, total shithole. And I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm gonna stay here. There's no way. So I was like, so then I drove about. Then I found another place that was pretty decent, and it actually had a smoking room, which was crazy. It wasn't the greatest, but it wasn't the worst. It was in the middle. Okay, decent price, I guess. It was about 15 minutes away. Then I found that place, and by the time I checked in there, it was about 3:30 in the morning, and it was right next door to a a Target. So I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do? Get up, go there, figure out the situation with the phone, and that's what I did. I slept only for a few hours. I slept pretty good actually. Got up, checked out, went to Target, and the guy who I talked to said, "Well, no, you did need this additional adapter." This guy basically didn't tell you the right information. So I was like, "Oh crap, okay." So I ended up getting that situated. Finally got that, you know, situated, and then I went out for breakfast, and I found a little booth where I can charge my stuff, all my stuff, and then I was good to go. And then I drove, and then I was fine, and then got home, no traffic. I stopped in Portland and went to Blue Moose, so I got some killer movies, which I'm super excited to watch and to share, and then made it home last night. So, yeah, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.